Mr. Downing.
Mr. President, through you to the members, and first, I want to recognize in the spirit that the minority leader has in the past that while we might differ on how we get there, this is a shared goal, and we certainly all in this body want to make sure that hardworking people, no matter the district they live in, no matter the corner of the Commonwealth that they live in, that they have the ability to make the most of their God-given talents. And as has been referenced in this debate on the budget already, and certainly will be referenced throughout the debate, some of the issues that we heard about on the Commonwealth Conversations tour throughout Massachusetts included, but were not limited to, the frustration of many of our constituents, many residents of Massachusetts, who had been working for years without seeing significant increases in their wages, while seeing skyrocketing health care costs, education costs, and other costs take a bigger chunk out of their paycheck, a bigger chunk out of any potential future savings. Something should be said about where we are at this moment before we consider this amendment, before we vote on this amendment when it comes to tax policy in Massachusetts. In 2003, when the income tax was frozen at 5.3% and a process was set up with several triggers relative to inflation and revenues in the state budget. When that process was set up, we have been living under that since. Where has that left us right now? As we have in fiscal year 12, 14, and 15, hit those triggers so as to reduce the personal income tax from 5.3 to 5.5 or 5.25, 5.20, and now to 5.15. 25% of the benefit of those tax cuts, 25% of the benefit of those tax cuts have flowed to the top 1% of income earners in Massachusetts. The top 1% of income earners in Massachusetts make, starting at $775,000 a year, they make on average $2.57 million per year. 25% of the benefit of those personal income taxes in fiscal year 12, 14, and 15, 25% of that $450 million that was given in the form of tax cuts have flowed directly there. Fully 67%, or 2/3 of the benefit of those tax cuts, have flowed to the top 20 or to the top 20% of all income earners. That is the tax policy that we have in place right now in Massachusetts. If we do nothing, if this amendment is not adopted, that status quo will remain. We will have a tax policy that not only reduces money from the Treasury, albeit slowly, but does so in a way that worsens inequality and that does not give us a path by which we can fund the important investments in expanding the earned income tax credit and expanding the personal exemptions that the chair of the Revenue Committee so aptly outlined. This is not about if we are going to give tax cuts here in Massachusetts. It is about how those tax cuts will be delivered. It's about making sure that the tax cuts that are given to the hardworking people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are working in the most efficient and effective way possible. It's about making sure that we aren't making a situation that, while it certainly is impacted by forces beyond our control, that we aren't making that situation any worse. Since 2000, when the vote that was earlier referenced was taken, we have seen a startling stagnation of wages for too many of the constituents that we represent across Massachusetts. All of our residents, all of our constituents, our family members, our friends, our neighbors, who fall in the bottom 50th of the income percentiles have seen their wages stagnate since 2000. At the same point, the wages for the top 10% in Massachusetts have increased at least 15%. Our current tax policy will only make that disparity worse. If given the choice between supporting those hardworking families who need the hand up the most, it is my argument, and hopefully it is one that my colleagues will join me in supporting, that the best allocation of those tax cuts, the best use of those tax cuts, is to support people who are out there working hard and haven't seen their paychecks grow. It's about rewarding work and not just rewarding wealth. It's about making sure that we pay for an expansion of the earned income tax credit, and at the same point do so in a way that is fair moving forward and has the least impact both on the budget and on other tax filers. Mr. President, 1/5 of all income tax filers in Massachusetts are single female heads of household. The median income for single female heads of household for that 20% of income tax filers is $37,000 a year. We know, based on the work of the Crittenden Women Union and so many others, that a single female head of household with a couple of kids, a single male head of household with a couple of kids, needs at least $64,000 each year to be self-sufficient, to not require public assistance of one form or another. And we all know from our anecdotal experience, from being out and about in our districts, that none of our constituents want to have to rely on public assistance in one form or another. They want to be able to make it on their own. They want to be able to fulfill their dreams. They want to be able to make the most of the talents that they have been given. The question here is if we're going to give tax cuts to the top 1%, or if we're going to give tax cuts to those single female heads of household. We know what will have the best economic impact in our communities. We know what will have the best economic impact in our districts. I am sure we're going to have disagreements about this. I know that. We should. But it is important to remember, it is important to stand here and ask ourselves the question, not if we give tax cuts, but how we're going to go about doing it. It's my estimation and my belief that this amendment is the best way to do that. I don't pretend that everyone here will agree with that, and I appreciate the spirited debate that I am sure that we will have, but it is my hope that if we want to tackle inequality, if we want to tackle poverty, if we want to reward work and not just wealth, that we support this amendment and adopt it today. I hope it's adopted, Mr. President.